Something. Thank you very much for having me here. It's a big schus to be here today. So I wanted to share a beautiful idea on the Parsha. This week's Parsha is Parshas Re'eh. There's a Gemara in Yevamos and Daf Ayin Tes that we may be familiar with. The Gemara says that there are three midos that Bnei Yisrael have. We are Rachmanim, Baishanim, and Gomlei Chasadim. Those are the three defining characteristics of a Jew. We have mercy, we're Rachmanim. We're Baishanim, we're modest, we're shameful, we don't act with haughtiness, we're not gaivadik. And we're Gomlei Chasadim, we do kindness for other people. What I think Chazaq is something that for sure stands for Gomlei Chasadim amongst the other two as well. So this is a Gemara in Yevamos. It actually comes up in a very interesting story how we find out about these three midos of Bnei Yisrael. The Gemara tells us on Daf Ayin Ches Amud Beis that there was a 3-year famine taking place in Eretz Yisrael, and David HaMelech wanted to figure out what was going on, what was the cause for this famine. So he looked and he saw perhaps it's the sin of Avodah Zarah. He checked and that couldn't be the case. He saw that wasn't really so. He said maybe they're over Avera, perhaps those involved in promiscuity. He said that's not the case. And then he said maybe there are those that are post-gate tzedakah barabim, they pledge money in public and they don't end up giving. So he thought maybe any of those sins was the reason for the famine. But then he said, I'm going to have to ask the Urim V'Tumim, I'm going to have to ask through Ruach HaKodesh and find out what was the sin that Bnei Yisrael must have committed for a famine. And then they found out that it was because Shaul killed the Givonim. What does it mean that Shaul killed the Givonim? Shaul had killed out the city of Nov, the city of the Kohanim, and they were the ones supporting the Givonim. And since Shaul had killed out Nov, Ir HaKohanim, who were the ones supporting the Givonim, it was as if Shaul had killed the Givonim. Killed them. So David HaMelech says, okay, let me go to the Givonim and ask them for Mechila. Perhaps if we get Mechila, they pardon us for that sin of killing out Nov Ir HaKohanim, maybe that'll end the famine. But they said, when David HaMelech came to them, they said, no, we want to take revenge from the generations that came out of Shaul. We want to take out revenge. We're not going to be mochel. We're not going to forgive them for what they did, for what Shaul did. So David HaMelech was gozer. David HaMelech decreed, and he said, if they're not willing to be mochel this sin, so then we can't allow such a people, the Givonim, to marry into Bnei Yisrael, because Bnei Yisrael have, in order to marry into our nation, you have to be Rachmanim, Baishanim, and Gomlei Chasadim. You have to have these characteristics, and a people like the Givonim who are not willing to forgive and forget and pardon the Jewish people for killing out Nov Ir HaKohanim, causing the suffering to the Givonim. If they weren't willing to be mochel, they can't be Rachmanim, Gomlei Chasadim, Baishanim. They can't be ones that can marry into Klal Yisrael. So that's how the Gemara tells us about these characteristics. So what's the source that we're Rachmanim? Where do we know that from? So the pasuk is actually from this week's parsha. The pasuk says, after Bnei Yisrael are commanded to kill out the city of the Ir Nidachas. Anybody know what the Ir Nidachas was? Ir Nidachas in this week's parsha is the city of unfortunately, if of a Jewish town worships Avodah Zarah, they have to get killed, and all of their possessions are burnt in the middle of the town. That's the parsha of Ir Nidachas, comes up in this week's parsha. After the whole mitzvah is told over, the pasuk says, V'nosam l'cha Hashem will give you rachamim, v'richamcha, and Hashem will have mercy on you, v'herbecha, and Hashem will increase you. So that's the makar, that's the source of Bnei Yisrael rachmanim, because Hashem says, I will give you rachamim, v'richamcha, and Hashem will have mercy on you. So the question is, how is this pasuk a source that we as a nation are always rachmanim? If there's a whole story with the Ir Nidachas, and we kill them out, Hashem will have rachmanas on us. Whatever that means exactly. But how is that a source that we're always Rachmanim? It just says that if we kill out the Ir Nidachas, Hashem will have Rachmanas on us. That shows that we're compassionate people. This is a pasuk that's a source that we're Rachmanim. How do we understand this? Gemara, it's a Mefurish Gemara in Yevamos Daf Ayin Tes. So I think we could understand it based on the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. The Or HaChaim explains what's Takab Pshat. Why does Hashem give us a promise that He'll give us Rachmanas. Now, how do we even understand Pshat of the Pasuk? So the R Yehudah says as follows. The R Yehudah says that if we go out and kill a whole town, maybe we're going to be worried that that act of horror, of killing out a whole town, is going to affect us. We're a compassionate people. We act with Rachmanas, and it's a mitzvah. Hashem tells us to kill them out, but after doing so, perhaps that could affect us. We could become a more vicious people, more callous, more violent type of people by killing out our city. It'll affect our insides. And he quotes a frightening idea, and he says, the Yishmaelim, the Arabs. The R Yehudah says the Arabs told us. This is talking. R Yehudah is writing in first person. Kemoshe sibru lanu hayishmaelim. The Arabs tell us. Kat harotzchem. Apparently, they were the executioners for the king. The Arabs, but in the times of the R Yehudah, the Arabs were the executioners. Ki yesh lahem cheshek gadol. And they said that because they're always involved in killing people, it affected them to the point that they had such a desire to kill people by killing. They have such a desire to kill people from constantly killing more and more people. They've been turned within. It affected them. They now have a desire to kill people. They became achzorim, people who are callous, who are not compassionate. That they lost that natural human instinct to be compassionate. They lost that. So the R Yehudah says that's why Hashem has to tell us that don't worry. You B'nai Yisrael, if you kill out a whole city of Ir Nidachas, it's not going to affect you. My bracha to you, says Hashem, is that I'll let the compassionate side, that natural sense of Rachmanis that you have as a Yid, you're not going to lose it. You are Rachmanim. Don't worry, you're not going to lose it. That's the bracha Hashem gives you. You're not going to turn into those that they kill and then it affects them and they become achzorim and they lose the ability to have rachamim. People may say that we're a Jewish people who doesn't have rachmanis. People in the world today may say we're a nation or we're people who don't have compassion. We know that the opposite is the truth. We're very compassionate people. And that, based on this beautiful R Yehudah, and the truth is the Kliyakar says a similar point as well earlier in the Parsha. And the Kliyakar says that there's an Isser in this week's Parsha, you're not allowed to eat blood. You're not allowed to eat blood, it's awesome. Okay. But the Kliyakar says that you have a bracha that if you don't eat blood, it will be good for you and your children. What's the Midah Keneged Midah? What connection not eating blood is it'll be good for you and your children? What's the connection? Says the Kliyakar, because you know what happens if you eat blood? It starts changing who you are. It makes you into a person, a hot-blooded, bloodthirsty type of person. That's what happens if you consume blood. So says the Kliyakar, if you avoid the blood and you follow the mitzvah of Hashem, it'll be good for you and your children. Because if a person Chas V'Shalom does eat blood, it could affect that person ad kedei kach, to the point that it'll then affect his children afterwards. He'll become someone who doesn't have rachmanus, who's an achzer by eating the blood, and it'll affect him, and Chas V'Shalom can affect his children. So says the Kliyakar, that's what the pasuk says, it'll be good for you and your children. And he says that's also the reason why the Torah says, like the R Yehudah, a few psukim later in the parsha, that's why the Torah says Hashem's going to give us a bracha of rachmanos after the mitzvah of killing out the Ir Nidachas. Hashem says, I'll give you rachmanos. It's not going to affect you, even though that's normally something we shy away from. Violence, we try to make peace, keep shalom. But if you have to fulfill the mitzvah of Hashem, it's not going to affect you. So that's the idea that I wanted to share with you today, that we have to work on these midos that the Gemara in Yevamos here tells us. That David HaMelech said the Givonim cannot marry into Klal Yisrael. They don't have the midos of Rachmana Baishanim and Gomlei Chasanim. We have to cultivate that natural attribute that we have of being Rachmanim. And even though, and for sure it means staying away from eating blood, because that could affect us, and it could affect our children. And for sure if it means we need to follow the mitzvah of Hashem, and sometimes we need to be violent, but Hashem will give us a bracha that the Rachmanos will stay with us. But our goal, of course, is to work and constantly work on the Midah of Rachamim towards each other, and that way, Mir Hashem, that's a beautiful hachana as we get ready for Elul, the Yimei Adin, and Mir Hashem bring more Zchuyos for Klal Yisrael at this time. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.